Pleasure.
Well, let's go to Canberra now, where the House of Representatives Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee is holding a news conference on the two marriage equality bills before the House.
Of the committee. That is complete bunkum. This report has the complete support of everyone on the committee, including the supplementary member, Mr. Bandt. What they need to do is read the report before they pass comment on what it actually says. That's always a good approach, I find. The reality is this report does not make recommendations as to the committee does not make recommendations as to how people should vote, how MPs should vote when it comes to the legislation, whenever that might be. But the report does obviously deal with the legislation put forward by Mr. Bandt and Mr. Wilkie and the other legislation put forward by Mr. Jones. So that's the first thing I wanted to clarify before the Christian groups beat me up in the media. The second thing is a bit more private, and that's so that my brothers don't beat me up at Christmas. Often when I come to these reports, I make comment on, and people ask about my two gay brothers. I just wanted to go on the record for the sake of my three non-gay brothers and clarify that I do have five brothers, three who are heterosexual and who work in the building trade, and every time I talk about my two gay brothers, they almost cop a hiding out there in the building industry. So I just wanted to clarify those two things before I talk about this report into the marriage equality bills that were before the House. Obviously this is a difficult topic. I'm a Queensland MP with an electorate that has a range of views about this topic. We've seen in Queensland with Premier Newman, who personally supports same-sex marriage legislation changing, but then having to steer that course in terms of the civil recognition legislation in Queensland, the recognition of same-sex relationships in Queensland, how it is a difficult course to steer. This committee, made up of 7 people, and the supplementary member of Mr. Bandt, also has a range of views. As you'll see from the actual individual comments by people, there's a range of views by committee members about what the Parliament should do. Now, they're the additional comments provided by both Laura Smythe and myself, and then also individual comments by Shane Newman and Mike Simon. Dr Sharman Stone, Mr Ross Vaster and Mr Bandt have provided individual comments as well. So people have a range of views when it comes to marriage. We're informed by our faith, by our upbringing, by the people we meet along our life journey in terms of how we approach marriage. The way the committee approached the legislation was from a dry, legal perspective, an empirical perspective, gather the information from academics, from religious leaders and the same-sex, the GLBTI community. We then looked at all the information, and obviously when it came to actual making a recommendation, we weren't able to reach consensus. So the committee stepped back from that, but we do have consensus in this report on how, if the Parliament so chose, how effective would this legislation be? Now, obviously, society has changed significantly since the Constitution was written, when the word marriage was inserted in the Constitution then. It took a long time for the Commonwealth Parliament to actually bring in the Marriage Act, to bring in the 9 states and territories legislation, which had different ages, different laws, different approaches to who could marry, who couldn't marry. There were Chinese people that couldn't marry, there were Aborigines who couldn't marry, there were all sorts of people that couldn't marry. When the Commonwealth in 1961, which isn't that long ago, decided to bring these laws together, society has changed a lot, obviously, since 1901. Now, I stress that there's no intention to diminish marriage in any way in this process. As far as I'm concerned, marriage is a very, very important institution. It has changed over the last, 100, 200, 300 years. I look at the definition of marriage that is the one we referred to in 2004, when the Howard and Latham joint ticket changed the Marriage Act, and it referred back to Hyde and Hyde, a case going back to 1866, 100 years before I was born. It talked about the definition of marriage for all Christendom, which might be a bit confronting for the Chinese and Muslims and like in my electorate. Things have changed a lot, and I believe that personally believe that it is now time to take that next step in terms of ensuring equality. And I refer to Marie Claire magazine, and I know that society has changed a lot when you've got a Zimbabwean-born Churchy, which is an Anglican boarding school in Brisbane, graduate called David Pocock, the international rugby player, you know, one of the toughest guys going around. When here's a photo of him in a shirt saying "I do," you know, when a rugby player is more progressive than many of the parliamentarians, even in the Labor Party, you know that Australia has changed significantly. And I might hand over to Mr. Bandt to make some additional comments.
Thanks, Graham. I firstly want to congratulate Graham as chair of this committee for taking on a quite difficult task where there's a range of views and coming up with a consensus report. And this report shows that Australia is ready for change. There were more people responding to the survey in this report than any other House of Representatives inquiry, as far as I'm aware, and 64% of the over 250,000 people who responded said that they wanted to see our bill get up. So we now have a situation where the Australian public is ready for change and it's now Parliament that's lagging behind. And I think this report will give a big boost to the people who want to see Parliament now reflect the will of the Australian people. But Parliament should remove discrimination from our marriage laws, not just because it's popular, but because it's the right thing to do. We need to end the discrimination that exists in Australia that says that there's two classes of people, some of whom have more rights than others. We need to give everyone in this country the right to celebrate their love with the person that they want to spend their life with. Everyone in this country deserves the right to go and see their kids or their relatives or their friends or their workmates have a wedding and have a marriage celebration and say to the whole world that they want to spend their lives together. More importantly, when we as Parliament debate these laws and pass laws, we send a message out to the whole community. And there is right now almost certainly a boy in a country town who is working out who he's attracted to, or a girl at high school who wants to take her female partner to the high school formal. And we need, as Parliament, to be sending the message out to those people, especially young people, especially people in rural Australia, that we believe that all love is equal and that their love for the person that they're in love with is just as valid as anyone else's. It's also revealed during the course of this inquiry that a number of members of Parliament are not yet ready for change. We have the situation where Labor has differing views amongst its members, but more absurdly, I think, the coalition is now the party of the freedom of choice and of individuals having the right to vote according to their conscience, is now denying its members the right to vote as they see fit, the right to give effect to their own consciences, the right to give expression to the views of their constituencies. I think that Tony Abbott's position of denying a free choice is unsustainable. And when you have Labor MPs able to exercise a free vote, there is absolutely no justification for Tony Abbott continuing to restrict the members of Parliament on his side of the chamber from voting according to their conscience. We still have some work to do to convince the coalition to allow a free vote. But I am confident that if members of the coalition have a free vote, that we will be able to see reform in the life of this Parliament. Because we're not there yet, if we put either of these bills up for a vote tomorrow, they'd probably be voted down. And it's for that reason that I'm going to continue debate on my bill in Parliament, but I do not want it to going to a vote this week or next week. I think we need at least the coming weeks over the winter break to continue the lobbying process of Tony Abbott and the coalition members of Parliament so that something shifts, and so that the people that I've spoken to privately on the coalition benches who want to support this bill are then able to come out publicly and do it. Lastly, I'll say that we have two bills in the House of Representatives and we have one bill in the Senate. Ideally, and this is something that is found in the committee's report as well, ideally I'd like to see one bill going through the House of Representatives. And there's some recommended changes in the report to both of the bills. Stephen Jones's bill needs a number of changes, ours needs fewer. I would like to see also a coalition MP come on and co-sponsor one of these bills. I think that the best chance of reform will be if we have a bill that's sponsored from all sides of Parliament. I won't die in a ditch over whether it's my bill or not. I think that as soon as one party tries to own this important reform, it's doomed to fail. We need to create the space for people of goodwill from all across the political spectrum to come out in support, and that's why I think the best thing would be a co-sponsored bill.
When we say come out in support, we obviously mean reveal their support for it. As Mr Bandt said, this was the largest number of responses in the history of the federal parliamentary committees, 276,437 responses. So that's basically 1 in 81 Australians have taken the time to respond. Obviously, it's self-selecting the process. It's not a random audit. We do have people who are passionately for and people passionately against. And as Mr Bandt said, there was about 2 in 3 supported change and 1 in 3 supported maintaining the status quo. I know that this is a controversial topic. I've spoken on this before when I went to my electorate in response to Mr Bandt's earlier legislation in terms of finding out what my electorate meant, and people were very passionate about it, and I respect their passion. But I do know this, that when it comes to marriage, I don't think of who you're married to or you're married to. I think of my wife and the person I love. My relationship with my wife won't be changed by other people's relationship in any way. And as I said in my introductory comments, legislators write the Marriage Act, not God, and our job as legislators is to make sure we get it right. Any questions?
Thousands and thousands of submissions. Do you think that all the people who made input into this inquiry will be disappointed that you weren't able to reach a conclusion? And what does that say for the road ahead if you can't even get a consensus in a committee?
Well, it's a broad church, this Parliament, and the reality is we have a range of views. That's the beauty of democracy and its curse. You know, I would love for the 8 members of the committee to have reached consensus in terms of making recommendations to the Parliament. We couldn't do that. But just because it's the start of that long journey that's, I suppose, been around for hundreds of years. But as Mr Bandt said, it's a case of going to talk to MPs, finding out how we can reach consensus on the floor of the Parliament. And, you know, this is a real matter of conscience, and I'm glad my mother's not alive, because I quote Martin Luther at the end of my introductory comment: to go against your conscience is neither right nor safe. And I think this is a pure matter of conscience for people, and they should have the ability to go out there and make a decision one way or the other.
What was the point of the committee inquiry if it is a matter for pure conscience?
Well, I'm just a humble chair of a committee. I'm a foot soldier of the Parliament. I do what the committee is asked to do by the Parliament. They asked us to look at this legislation and the efficacy of the 2 bits of legislation. That's what we've done. That's what lawyers do every day. We look at it dryly, without passion. Even though there's comments in here that move me to tears, we do it. And we do our job properly by looking at it and logically.
Difference to the 2 bills?
Not significantly. The intent is there. I think it was just clarifying, because the reality is it talks about adults. I think that's Mr Jones' legislation, talks about adults. The reality is you can be a child and marry with the approval of the appropriate adults. and you're the right age, people can get married at 17, so they're legally not an adult. So we just wanted to clarify that in terms of the Jones legislation. I'll let Mr Bandt talk about the suggested amendments to his legislation.
Oh, look, the amendments are really to make sure the bill does a better job at what it's intending to do, and a couple of probably the most significant suggestion was that in both the bills we suggested redefining marriage to be between two persons regardless of gender or sexuality or sexual orientation. There was some pretty strong evidence that said, look, rather than start listing things, the simplest thing to do would be to say, instead of marriages between a man and a woman, you just say a marriage is between two persons, full stop, and leave it at that, rather than trying to list attributes. Yeah. And that was a fairly sensible suggestion that had some quite widespread support. So it's really a series of amendments that will help the bills do a better job.
It's just tinkering. The intent was pretty clear. It's just the curse of not having parliamentary counsel, I guess, will work on these things.
Can you clarify what you did actually reach consensus on? Is it essentially that what the bill aims to do, it will do?
In terms of the efficacy of the legislation, if you, I mean, I could almost take you to the page. We go through the history and the values and all those sorts of things, but then right at the end of the recommendations, before we get to the additional comments, we just, in the conclusion, say, well, these are the things that we would change, that we would recommend the Parliament change. Well, number one piece of ledge would be preferable, and then it would reflect these recommendations. That's basically what we agreed to come up with. And as I said, that was a broad range of MPs sitting at the table, and we came up with that consensus.
Including the Liberal MPs?
Yes. Yeah, this is a consensus report, unanimously supported by everyone, including the Greens representative, Adam. It was unanimously supported by all. You need to look at the additional comments to see the personal views of those MPs about what they think should happen in terms of the vote.
And what's holding up getting one bill? Why are we still talking about two bills?
I might let Adam answer that one.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. We're obviously going to wait and see what the Senate inquiry comes up with. That's looking at, that has the advantage of both looking at the bill in the Senate as well as the two, so it may come up with a view as to the best way forward. Look, I don't know. I'm continue to be willing to have a co-sponsored bill. I do think that if the coalition allows a conscience vote, then my hope is that we would move very rapidly towards one bill, potentially with a coalition co-sponsor, and then that it may be up to them as to what bill they're prepared to sponsor.
Have you spoken to Stephen Jones about this?
Oh, look, I've raised it with him a while ago. I haven't had any recent discussions. I've raised it with him and made the offer. Look, at the moment, that doesn't seem to be the way that they want to go, but maybe after this report that might shift things along a bit.
And just one more. You said you'd prefer to have a coalition MP also co-sponsoring it without naming names. Can you tell us, has anyone that you've spoken to privately in the coalition who do want a conscience vote actually said that if they get it, they would be prepared to put their name on the bill?
I haven't spoken to anyone who said that, but I've spoken to people who said they want to support it, but they feel constrained about having further discussions, including about things like co-sponsorship, until Tony Abbott changes his position.
Coalition MPs.
Could I make that comment that obviously there are 150 MPs in that chamber, 149 of them aren't in the Greens. So the reality is you would need both sides of the chamber to have a conscience vote for it to get through. Now, I could tell you this doesn't win me votes in Moreton, doesn't win me votes in my electorate. I don't want to be lead float in the Mardi Gras parade. This is just me doing my job. And I would hope that everyone in the chamber was able to approach it in that way, because until there is that the two major parties make a decision and the politics is stripped out of it, that ain't going to happen.
Some coalition MPs
Okay, we'll leave that there. That was live
they
from
have
Canberra.
conscience
Labor
vote
MP
or,
Graham Perrett
or
was the
votes
chair of the
in
committee
bills
looking at the same-sex
free.
marriage bills before Parliament. We also heard from Adam Bandt there. Political reporter Julie Doyle joins me now from Parliament House in Canberra. Julie, so just put this in context for us. There are two bills before the House now, and this committee took a look at both of those bills.
That's right, Joe. We have the bill by the Greens, Adam Bandt, and the Independent, Andrew Wilkie, and then we have a separate bill by the Labor backbencher, Stephen Jones. Now, this committee has had a look at both those bills, and as we heard there, they haven't come up with a recommendation as to what the Parliament should do. What they've said is that it's up to the Parliament to decide how it should vote on this, so they didn't reach a consensus on that. But people did make some additional comments, some personal views further down in the report, where it showed that the committee really was divided on this issue. We had a couple of the members, Graham Perrett and Laura Smythe, saying that they supported the change. Then we had some Labor MPs, Shane Newman and Mike Simon, saying they didn't want to see a change until there was sufficient community support. And then we had some of the coalition members, Sharman Stone and Ross Vasta, saying they didn't support any change to the Marriage Act as it is. So the committee as a whole pretty much reflecting what we're seeing out in the community, a wide range of views. But what they have come up with is they've recommended, if the Parliament does go ahead and consider these two bills, they've recommended some tweaking, some tinkering, some amendments perhaps to make them more effective. But they certainly haven't come up with a recommendation as to whether these bills should pass or not.
So it doesn't lead to any substantive change in the position that we've got now with the pro-same-sex marriage people calling on Tony Abbott to allow a conscience vote in the coalition, and that's the only way this is going to get through.
Yes, there's no change there. It doesn't affect that at all. So what we've heard there is Adam Bandt, for example, saying he doesn't want to put his bill to a vote until there is a conscience vote for the coalition as well. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So we have the Labor MPs having a conscience vote, but the coalition MPs won't. And we've seen the debate on Adam Bandt's bill get underway just a little bit earlier this afternoon. And already we've seen a lot of people speaking against this bill. We've seen several Labor MPs speaking against it, several coalition MPs speaking against it. So it would seem without that conscience vote for the coalition and for the Labor Party that there won't be the numbers. And that's why Adam Bandt's saying he doesn't want to put it up until he can do some more lobbying and maybe convince Tony Abbott to allow a conscience vote. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
OK, we'll leave it there. Julie Doyle in Canberra.